And I guess Mr. Clinch?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Thank you. This is the facilities workshop. We have 3 items that we'll be updating you on today. The Canoe Creek Charter Academy is first up, and then we'll be rolling into the elementary school redistricting, and we'll land with the Denjon Middle School project update. So first, we're going to be talking about Canoe Creek Charter Academy. This has been a fast-moving issue. We initially did a very high-level review of that site on November 16th. And we shared some of those findings with you at our last facilities workshop. We have since been back out to the site to do a deep dive. All stakeholders, safety, security, maintenance, operations, facilities, all took part in this deep dive to do a comprehensive review of all the systems and building components out at Canoe Creek Charter School. I would like to recognize 2 individuals that led this effort. First, Jason Lindsay, Facilities Planning Specialist, and Michael McFarland, Senior Facility Manager, Design. Thank you, gentlemen, for your hard work.
I will also share with you, Board, that as we've gone through this process, the team has researched multiple different options, looking at different grade configurations, different possibilities for what would seem to make the most sense, and that's what lands us with the recommendation from staff that you will see before you this afternoon.
So this is the facility. It's located off of Canoe Creek Road, and this is a depiction of the site. I'd like to point out the area highlighted in yellow.
Now, this is a designated conservation area.
And it's a perpetual conservation easement, which means that it cannot be impacted. We cannot mitigate it in any way.
Basically, you have,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
these are the classroom buildings, and this is the support areas with admin, media center, kitchen, cafeteria.
And the car and bus loop are separated. Bus loop is to the bottom of the
Bus
screen.
loop enters from here, car loop from here.
Thank you, Mark.
What's the ownership? I know it's 29 acres, but is it all of the rest of that?
Yes, it's basically 30 acres. but
Up to
29.
up to Friars Cove and Canoe Creek, the whole corner and everything. That's all.
Yes, sir. 29.923 acres, and the school district owns.
Or I guess up to the Dollar General now, but yeah.
Yes. And as you know, the district has always owned the property and leased the property to the foundation for the purposes of operating the charter school.
Existing functional capacity, 660, and this is the historic enrollment over the last 5 years. And now we're going to move into various scenarios. I'll turn it over to my director of design and construction to run through the various scenarios that we've looked at. First is year 1 as a K-6.
That would be next year, and it would be a K-6, so we could retain those 6th graders that might transition into the K-8,
graders.
the 5th graders that are that would transition to the 6th grade and not lose them. The existing configuration, the most minimal thing on the whole site is the kitchen cafeteria. The rest of the school is basically built to SREF standards as far as size and functionalities go. So the first year, we've gone through, as Mr. Clinch mentioned, with all the stakeholders. We've gone through by area, facilities, IT, maintenance, all the different components that we would need to make this suitable for occupation and for occupancy. And that comes to $1.5 million. We have an outstanding payment for the build-out that was originally done of $5.8 million. So the total cost for moving in, we estimate, is at $7.36 million. We've got some reserve built in there, as you see, so we're very confident in those numbers.
And by opening as a K-6, we feel like we would have the least disruption to families who currently have students there, In grades 6, 7, and 8, obviously 8th grade students will be transitioning to high school anyway. There's a small population of 7th graders who we could serve in our existing middle schools. The majority of them would be zoned for Harmony Middle.
Harmony.
We don't really feel like it's fair to continue to offer a full middle school program there without the middle school facilities that we currently are able to offer, both academically in terms of the enrichment and acceleration that we offer to our middle school students, but also the amenities like sports and those types of things.
Would the 6th grade be an option or a zone?
We could also offer the 6th graders an option to go to Harmony Middle if they
Okay.
chose to do that, but we
Gotcha.
would offer to keep them if
So they could get busing and over to Harmony. Okay.
Yeah.
They want-
So we're busing 7th graders, we might as well bus 6th graders.
Are there any questions on the year one options?
So K5 would be a hard zone, and then in the 6th grade would be an option.
Correct. But remember that in all of our zones, we offer choice, Mr. Booth.
No,
And-
but I mean,
not without-
choice
not
with
yes.
transportation.
Correct,
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
Choice, we offer choice without transportation.
Without, this would be choice with.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move to year two. Before jumping into this option, I failed to recognize representatives from the Osceola Foundation. Mr. Tommy Tompkins, the founding father of the Osceola Foundation. Miss Carrie Avery, the executive director, and Miss Amber White, the charter manager. Thank you for being here today. We'll move forward now with year two, which would be the K-8.
So during the school year of year one, what we're calling year one, we would actually be doing the build-out for year two, should we go forward with this option. So to kind of keep that in mind. What year two adds a one-story building, which is, so we're going to add this building alongside the existing, what's existing is in blue. We'll add this building, and you can see it has the community center, admin, dining, and kitchen for the full 1,200 student stations, which is what this would be built out to. It has an additional two-story classroom to make up for the missing classrooms, to make it a full K-8 for the 1,200 student stations, and a full gymnasium. We'd also add a track, although it's not a traditional track, it would be the same size, same 400-meter
400
track,
meter.
just a little different size because we can't encroach into this conservation area. It's the only way we can fit it on the site if we want to add that amenity. Still is room for the track and field facilities, for soccer and for the basketball. And we'd have to have some additional retention because of the additional impervious materials that would be adding.
One of the other things that the current facility is missing is a media center. That is something that charter schools typically don't necessarily operate a full media center. We do believe that the media center is an important part of a school situation, a school family, and the media specialist plays an important role in literacy. So that is something that we would recommend incorporating in the new building.
And for year one, we have saved items out of Den John Middle School to be used for the media center during year one. So we took their media center amenities and we're saving them. So we're adding all of these amenities. You can see we next.
That gets us to a total of $30 million and change. In comparison, the project budget for a new K-8, but that's the full 1,415 student stations. That's $40.3 million. But keep in mind that this is just a comparison, and there are a lot of unique features
And this
and situations on
And
this.
it takes into account
project.
repurposing the existing kitchen cafeteria, which is woefully inadequate even for the student stations that they have there now, in our opinion. But certainly for the 1,200 student stations, it would not be adequate. So we would repurpose that area.
So this doesn't count the $7 million
Correct.
year
That is,
one, so it's 37 total,
That's on
and
the
that
next
would be,
slide.
that would be, oh, okay.
and but that also includes
We're
the
gonna-
$5
Does this
million for the
the full
additional
37, let's say year one and year two combined, 37, 38, does that,
And that's
that
what-
includes a remodel?
Here you go.
Oh, there you go. That
Sorry.
includes the remodel of the existing building.
Yes.
Yes.
So are we, I guess a question just to the experts, is it better to I guess it'd be hard because that wouldn't give you year one if you had to tear down buildings. But would it be better to just tear the buildings down and start over? Or was it, I'm just asking your professional.
Yeah, that
opinion.
would
If we
be-
had if we had an absolute greenfield site, it would be less expensive overall for us to go and build new.
But that's not the situation. We have
no, I
existing buildings
understand
that
that.
are very serviceable. So now that would force us into, in addition to demolishing those buildings, to a phased project where we would now have to work around that ongoing operation. That would add time to the project, additional
And I'm not
costs.
questioning what you're bringing forward. I'm just asking.
Right.
Now, we've evaluated the buildings, and they were technically built to SREF standards. We have all the life safety facilities there. So they are, certainly reusable, but they would take some money to get them up to our current standards.
For the most part, it complies with SREF. There's a few things that we found that do not, minor things. Nevertheless, just to protect our interests, up until recently, public schools could not acquire a charter school because they're not built to SREF, typically. Most of the school is built to SREF. However, what we would recommend is that there's a new exemption that's allowed now. We would recommend pursuing that exemption so that if there are any components that remain that don't comply to SREF, we would be covered in the eyes of DOE.
Wait, can you go back and make that point again?
So back up until recently,
Yes.
there were no exemptions that allowed a public school system district to acquire and operate a charter school. For the most part, because charter schools are not traditionally built to SREF.
Right.
In this case, most of this school is built to and complies with SREF. But there's a few minor things that do not. For example, the covered walkway that goes out to the bus loop is not lit. SREF requires that it be lit. So we could add lighting, but just to be safe, we are recommending, if there's anything that we may have missed where the existing facility doesn't comply with SREF, we would recommend pursuing that exemption that is now allowed.
Right, that's what I wanted. So there's an exemption that would cover
There's-
us in that
And that's
case.
within the last year that this
Okay.
exemption has been available.
Okay. And I guess the only thing that you're upgrading, quote unquote, in the existing building is the cafeteria and the dining, correct? That's the only thing that needs to be updated?
In addition to the other items that are listed
there's-
under each of the categories, facilities, IT, to bring the servers.
Oh, okay,
to-
so this right here, so there's
And we're
the
doing that year one.
1.5, okay, so the
Yes.
1.5 just to kind of do some kind of cosmetics and minor works, plus the addition of the cafeteria and dining, is that what makes up the 7 million? Or is the cafeteria and
No,
dining
the
in the
reconfiguration.
30 million?
Right,
Okay.
the reconfiguration of the kitchen cafeteria is in the year 2 K8. We would do that then.
Okay, because
We do
okay, I
have some
understand.
school nutrition services expenditures in year one. That's to add coolers and things of that nature, but we would not remodel the space.
Yeah, the rest of the 7 million is the outstanding balance. I got it. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
So bottom line, there's not a significant savings to do this conversion as opposed to starting over with a new school. However, we own the property. We're eventually going to take ownership of the building. The question is, do we take ownership of it now, when it seems to make sense from a student enrollment and growth standpoint on the east side of the county? I mentioned to Mr. Booth earlier this morning, Harmony High School called. They enrolled 40 new students today. So there is still tremendous growth on the east side of the county. We have also found that not just with Canoe Creek Charter, but with the Matter Charter in St. Cloud, as well as Creative Inspirations and American Classical, they're not pulling as many students from our district-operated elementary schools. So this proposal allows us to save a little bit of money, $3 million, compared to a brand-new school. It allows us to push out the old Hickory K school, K5 school, although there is need for in K8 now in another community in that particular area. It also allows us then to go ahead and get the conversion done, bring these students and their families back in to kind of accommodate the growth that we're doing at an earlier basis.
So this
the
will-
bottom line, we take it over now, we spend 37, we take it over 10, 15 years ago, and we start over and do whatever.
So this will push that Hickory project, the K5?
It would push the K-5 out, although there is now a need, if we revise the plan, for a school in which community, Rhonda? Bueno Lago is needing it like a K-8 that would kind of move up. But we need Bueno Lago and Old Hickory, or we need Bueno Lago and Canoe Creek.
You said pursuing the exemption, that tells me that it's not some foregone conclusion that you get an exemption?
It's
requires
just,
a super-
right, it's the construction flexibility Florida statute. Same thing when we pursued the exemption for the portables and requiring
canopies,
covered walkways to
walkways
them.
to portables.
So we're now exempt from having to do that. We can still do it if we want to, but we don't have to. Today, DOE requires that unless you have the exemption. So it would be the
I
same
got that
format.
part of it, but
And if you remember how we
what
did
is the
that,
pursuit of the exemption?
It's
require?
really, it really
back
depends.
then, it was a supermajority vote. The other change in the Florida statute is that now it requires just a majority vote. So as long as we have a majority
the school
vote,
board
we're-
can give the exemption.
right, it's
Okay.
granted
Oh,
within
got
the
it.
It's not
school
something you have to
board.
get from FDOE.
Correct, yes, sir.
They've already given that-
Absolutely.
But at
Option
this point in
over.
time, we have not identified anything specific that would require that exemption.
You know,
That is-
there's minor things that, again, the lighting, the covered walkway that goes to the bus loop, and there were just a few, the 6-foot fencing around potential hazard areas, mechanical equipment, backflow preventers, that type of thing. Yes, it's easy enough to do that, but in the event that something falls through the crack and we miss something, we don't want to open ourselves up to scrutiny by the DOE. We just want to make sure that we're well covered, from a risk management insurance standpoint.
And, go ahead.
Well, the other issue, of course, is we own the land. So if we were to go after another green field that wasn't being offered up through a development, through impact fee credit swaps, we would have to purchase that land. So we're saving, and that can be a substantial amount of money, as you know, for something, 40 acres. Granted, it's not all completely usable because of the conservation easement, but it's still a large tract of land, large enough for a K-8.
As far as the waiver is concerned, I remember what you're talking about when we did it with the canopies. Part of that, though, is that where the school board is voting to allow for the waiver to take place and taking on the assumption of liability associated with that. Am I not correct?
Yes.
Yeah. I think, Mark, your point about the acquisition of Greenfield is an important part to bring into the equation here is, if we have to go out and buy another 30 acres at X factor per acre, what's that going to cost us as opposed to taking down property, acquiring back, if you will? Or
And this property
researching
has
property
good
we already have?
access as far as availability of road systems. It's, that's something we found to be a challenge, finding new property.
As far as, and I apologize for coming in a little bit late, as far as the facility, I see the projections of the numbers, and thank you guys for pulling all that together. I know something the board was very intentional about. Do you feel like that gets us to the minimum operating standard that we would have for the facility, or does that get us the standard that we're used to and we would desire within any one of our facilities?
This would be comparable to our other middle school and K facilities.
It would be equitable. The only thing that would be a little different, as I mentioned earlier, was that we don't have a traditional track. We would have the 400-meter track, but it's an odd shape to avoid the conservation area.
Instead of the oval, the 400-meter oval, it would be irregularly shaped.
So they
but
wouldn't
still
be able to have
400 meters.
meets. They wouldn't be able to.
So they would not be able to.
So,
Most cases
with
don't.
saying that, why even do the track?
There are some of our other K-8s and middle schools that don't have running tracks, but from an equity standpoint, there are some that do. We're trying to match that equity.
I get the equity piece,
What we're
but
talking about here, though, is that it still would be able to host interscholastic meets,
Meets.
those types of things for all of our middle school programs.
Yes.
It just couldn't serve as an FHSAA track for a high school competition.
Oh, I get that part of it.
That's all.
Which is something that doesn't occur at the middle school K-8 level anyway.
No, and look, my kids participate in all these things, so I go to all these, I see, I'm at all these events. I'm just, what's the cost of the track?
It's minimal.
Okay.
250,000.
Yeah.
Basically, it's become our standard to include them in our other.
No, I get that part of it.
So-
I just,
What do we feel like we're sacrificing in using this site the way that we're laying out, as opposed to if we went straight out greenfield, new construction, out of the box, prototype, and current standards that we're operating within? What are we leaving on the table that we should be aware of?
One of the sacrifices is you're taking ownership of a building that's a little bit older. It is in good condition. It has a brand-new chiller. Pumps and motors appear to be original. So those types of things. Has a standing seam metal roof, appears to be in good condition. Does require some gutter and downspout work, but it's not a brand-new facility where we're setting the clock at zero from a facility condition assessment standpoint, but it does have good bones.
The main difference is if we were building a brand-new K-8, we would probably have more multi-story.
Yeah.
But that can be an advantage too, having more one-story, because then you have more flexibility with your age groups.
Are we not able to replicate the Bella Lago Model 2 if this is a prototype? I thought I remember hearing that this classroom building and office building was similar to what we've done at Bella Lago.
We would use prototypical kit of parts. So where a prototype, if you're familiar with Toho High School, for example, you can go in and just pull the gymnasium piece of that, or just a classroom building.
And that's what we've done. This is a very, schematic concept version. It is to scale, just to show proof of concept that yet it will fit. But this is based off of an actual prototype that we have access to.
And we have many prototypes within our inventory that we can utilize. This particular version, we looked at the Ziskovich kit of parts prototype elements.
What percentage of the building, speaking of setting the clock at zero, would not be set at zero? What percentage are we talking about that's already built that we might need to refurbish at some point, would you say? So all of this stuff that's here, the 1.5?
Yeah, and, when you look at life expectancy
Yeah.
of any system or component, standing seam metal roofs, for example, have about a 25 to 35-year life expectancy, depending on how they have been cared for. So at some point in time, we may have to go in and coat that metal roof, reseal it. The chillers is a great example. Life expectancy is about 15 years on a chiller. Some chillers you only get 7 years out of. Other chillers, you can run them for 35 years. So that chiller is fairly new. So we believe that we would get, it appears as though it was installed within the last couple of years. So we should get another 12, 13 years last year, so another 14 years or so. But the pumps and motors is something that, would come up for replacement sooner. Electrical systems, we reviewed the fire alarm system. It's operational, it meets code. But all systems have some sort of life expectancy.
Sure.
But
I was just
the quick and dirty.
yeah.
The existing building's 660 student stations. We're adding 550.
Okay.
And some more amenities. We're adding a gym. We're adding a kitchen cafeteria. So we're adding actually a little bit more than what we have there now.
540.
No, I know what we're doing. I just have questions about the existing building. And the reason I ask that question is because I know we have a situation at Gateway where we have the buildings that were all different. That will be the same kind of situation, right? We have a
Yes.
building
In the
that's
long run.
very new, right? I guess that's what I'm looking at. That's the only reference point that I have is, we have a situation with Gateway where we don't have all the buildings being refurbished at the same time or renovated at the same time, and there's a time clock and there's there's all of these things in the background that are happening. So I just want to know, if that's going to happen in this particular case, what percentage are we looking for? Are we going to have the same kind of situation? That's where my question is coming from.
Let me take Because I think you're right, by the way. I think when you play this out and you look at Castaldi 10, 15, 20 years from now for redoing the older portion of the facility, we're going to find ourselves in a similar situation to where it's these facilities are older, but yet we invested money in them to upgrade them. They may or may not Castaldi out. These portions of the campus are newer. We're not going to be able to do anything with that. I think because it's a piecemeal to an extent, we would find ourselves at some point down the road having to deal with whatever that means in 15, 20 years down the road.
Yes, but also keep in mind that the outstanding principal, we get those buildings for $5.8 million, which is, as compared, a pretty good deal.
And honestly, we really run into that with all of our renovation projects where we've added wings or added buildings. For example, at Michigan Avenue, there was the entire kindergarten piece at the back that we left pretty much the same, other than just some slight cosmetic upgrades. Some of the parts even at Dinjon or St. Cloud Middle are not being torn down, just some slight cosmetic upgrades because they were newer parts of the building. As we've added wings, for example, to Celebration High School or Point Siena, that's one of the ways that we've had to respond to growth has been with wings. So you're always going to have some parts of the facility that are newer, perhaps in other parts, and that's how you have to stage your renovation projects when you come into
But
those.
maintenance tracks all that with their
Yeah,
FCAs,
sure.
so they keep a good tally of what
Once
we're doing with it.
once we take over, excuse me, once we take over this, then it becomes a district facility, right?
Yes.
And we'll fall under all the rules
Correct.
of the Castaldi and all that, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I think one thing to bear in mind too, just this for our own personal analysis board, is that, you know, we talk about, and I mentioned it earlier in response, we talk about the fact that if we had to go out and buy a new piece of land, what that would cost. But remember, we already bought this piece of land. It wasn't this board, it was another board, but nonetheless, we already have money. It's not like we're getting free land. We've already
Skin in the
paid
game.
for it at some point in time. I don't know what our basis is in the land. I don't know if Rhonda or somebody has any clue what we paid for it originally, but it's not like this is free dirt. We already paid for it.
True.
One more point.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, just because I didn't have the experience of the exception with the other school, I suppose. I know. One last question. With regards to the exception that we're filing in order to make sure that we're covered with the DOE, does that exception expire? Or is this like an
No.
ongoing thing? Okay.
No, it's governed by the local school board. If they
So it
so
could.
chose at a future
It
date
could,
to exempt it.
Yeah.
But as long as the school board that's in place wants to keep that exemption in place, they're able to do so
And
by
under-
the law of the Florida statute.
What circumstances would that come into contention again with a different board? What would trigger that exception from being discussed again? Okay.
I can't think of anything why we would want to go the other way.
But the point
it
is-
provides the most latitude
Right,
for a school board.
you're bringing forth the exception, but the plan is to bring everything up to standard anyway.
At
right?
some point in time,
Okay.
yes.
Got it, thank you.
How do you guys feel about the ingress, egress, and on-site stacking of the site? I know it's a rear-loaded site, so that's good. We have a long drive and all that.
Right.
Does this site and this site plan accommodate our desire to move as much traffic off of Canoe Creek and stack on property?
It's good that we have two separate entrances, a
That
bus
are either
loop
end.
and a car loop that are separated quite a bit. That helps a lot. That is something that is SRF, but there are variations to that. We actually have a little bit more parking than the facility actually really needs right now by SRF standards, so that's good. We don't have to add a whole lot more parking. Buses, it depends on how far-reaching we go with our busing to see if we would ever need any more stacking. But there's, again, quite a bit of stacking on the road for the bus loop.
And as we upgrade to the K-8, you can see that we would be adding some additional parking right in front of those new buildings, between the buildings and the irregular running track.
Yeah, I just think it's an important consideration for us to bear in mind that we don't, right now it's under capacity. That's part of the challenge, right? It's not being fully utilized. That area is still growing and developing out. Traffic is going to continue to increase along the corridor. I just don't want, looking back in a year or two or five, go, oh man, this site's not going to accommodate what it really needs with a 1,200 student station campus.
Well,
Neither do I,
we've
since
kept
I
that
have
in
to drive by it
mind.
every day.
And that was
We've
one of
kept
the-
that in mind with with actually targeting that 1,200.
That's
We are looking at
That's
future
what
growth for the
helped to
1,200.
drive that 1,200 versus our prototype sizes, which is 1,415. Okay, with that, we will move into our funding considerations. Ms. Sarah Graber, our Chief Financial Officer, will provide us this update.
So obviously the first step of this was how much is outstanding on the existing bonds, and that's the 5.8 million as of this coming June 30th, 2020, would be what we would need to do in order to get those bonds paid off. I think what we would want to look at this point, though, now that we've assembled this entire project and have the whole scope of the whole project, is we would want to be looking at the $37 million figure and how are we going to fund this entire project in total. If we were starting with a brand new school, you know, our approach the last several years has been to use 100% impact fees for new growth, for new student stations. So what would be a little bit different about this is that we couldn't use impact fees for the aspect of taking over the existing student stations and renovating the existing facilities. So we'd be looking at kind of a split funded project here. The next consideration would be how much do we want to just use cash that we have on hand versus going out and issuing debt. That's pretty, you know, money's pretty cheap right now as far as low interest rates. So we would want to at least look into the consideration of issuing, doing a bond issue for the entire $37 million project. We would work with PFM, our financial advisors, to go through all the analysis for about a $37 million bond deal would be my recommendation. And then we would have the option to make those debt payments with a portion funded through impact fees and a portion funded through our regular ad valorem dollars.
What does that do to our bond capacity and where we sit and where we want to be from a rating standpoint?
We're good. We have plenty of capacity, plenty of bonding capacity right now, so that
But
wouldn't
it
be a
doesn't
major.
jeopardize in any way our rating or where we sit today?
No.
I mean, I know we have capacity, we've been intentional about that, but
Yeah, we have the capacity to do it.
Sarah's
would
spent a lot
not.
of time, and Bob Gang has
Yeah,
been
it
involved
would-
heavily in researching this as well as conversations.
Yeah, we've already been working with bond counsel and our financial advisor on this. Yeah, I wouldn't be concerned at all about our ratings from that standpoint. And even the $37 million price point is not huge in terms of really affecting our bonding capacity.
so let me ask this. Talk to me both sides. Bond is your recommendation. Why not use our existing funding sources as opposed to taking on new debt?
Our cash on hand. So when we were talking about just the 5.8 million, or even the 5.8 million plus a couple million more for renovations, I would have probably recommended, hey, you know, we don't need to issue debt for that dollar amount. As we get into this larger project in the $38 million range, that's where we really need to look at, since interest rates are so low right now, does it make sense to leverage that debt issuance opportunity rather than taking a significant chunk of the cash that we do have on hand and putting it into this particular project?
So to push back a little bit, if we weren't
It's
going to
absolutely
issue
the right
new
question,
debt
though.
for Hickory Tree, was that the project we're moving back? Talking about moving back?
Correct.
If we weren't going to
So-
issue new debt for that project, why would we consider issuing debt for
What's
this?
different is that would have been 100% impact fees, which we have impact fees sitting in the bank right now. To the extent that we need to use property taxes for this project, the consideration is, do we want to take all of our property tax dollars and put them into this project? Or do we want to keep them available to continue to do things like invest in more buses, invest in more
What's
computers?
the breakdown, though, between our ability to use impact fee dollars for the new capacity and ad valorem dollars for the existing capacity, retrofit and otherwise? Because that's a key
I'd say-
distinction.
Yes, and that's an exercise we'll have to go through in detail to really be solid on the impact fees that we're using. At a first kind of high level glance, I'm thinking somewhere around 40% or so
Is what?
impact fees.
Okay.
One thing you can look at is there's 660 student stations existing, we'd be adding 540. So that type of a percentage. Another thing we have to look at though is the actual cost, and that's where we'll have to get into what's the cost of each component of this project. So for example, adding a new classroom building for additional student stations can be 100% impact fee funded. When you get into adding the new expanded kitchen cafeteria, gymnasium, ball fields, that's where we would need to prorate a percentage of how much of that is really for existing student capacity versus new student capacity.
So,
And the renovation piece on the existing facilities, we shouldn't use impact fees at all. Also, I looked into to pay off the existing bonds, the 5.8. We shouldn't use impact fees at all because we're not adding student stations to our community. Even though they're new, they're going to be new
They're new to us,
traditional
but they're not-
seats. We're not adding
actual
adding
uses.
capacity to the district as a whole.
Is that a factor, or is that just an opinion?
That's bond council's recommendation.
Okay.
if I'm understanding correctly, and maybe I'm not, is we would only be using 40%. Only 40% of this project will be funded by impact fees?
Yes.
So does that mean that really we wouldn't acquire any more debt for 37 million? It would be 40% of that? Is that what you're saying?
No, we could issue the debt for the entire 37, and then as we make those debt payments over the next X number of years, however long we decided to issue that debt for, as we make those debt payments, we would use impact fees for about 40%.
For 40% of that, okay, so I
versus
understand.
the other consideration would be, do we want to issue debt for less than 37 million? Take 10 million, 20 million of impact fees out of the bank today
Yeah.
for this, and then issue debt at a lower amount. And that's something that PFM will help us work through, all those different scenarios and what makes the most sense
And that's
in today's market
and that's kind of why you're
conditions.
exploring not just paying the 40% up front, but okay.
Right.
I
If
got
with
that. That was going to be
with
my
interest
question,
rates
but I
being
think
low,
you've
it
answered.
may help us. It may make more sense for us to keep some of our cash on hand to use for other things.
Gotcha. I'm good. Okay. Sarah, slide.
Sarah, that completes this section, does it not? So, Dr. Pace, what's the, I know one of our project partners here, what's your timeline here? It's on our agenda later.
It is.
Are we up against a time crunch right now?
Well, the
Because those
challenge,
financial components are important to me in understanding how we're going to pay for it, what's the right approach, what's the
Yes.
financial
And
analysis.
that is one thing we talked to Bob Yang about, is we're going to have to be very clear on the timeline between now and June 30th, that all these things happen in the right timeline. I'll let you speak. I would say there's not a huge time urgency like today.
well, the challenge, the challenge is a couple of different things. Number one, just the fact that the board is considering this obviously has an emotional impact on the school, the staff, the community there. Also, if we're going to take on this additional responsibility for this school, then we want to move forward with the redistricting process. We want to move forward potentially with elementary redistrict on the east side anyway. We talked about it before Christmas, in order to eliminate the need for portables at Hickory Tree, to fill some of the seats in the new wing at Michigan Avenue that's been fully renovated, and also then to potentially make some additional space for VPK at St. Cloud Elementary School, to level the populations at those three schools, eliminate the need for portables at a significant cost savings at Hickory Tree. If we're going to do the school, we would bring Canoe Creek into that redistricting mix. And we really can't wait much longer on those kinds of decisions, just because we always like to communicate those decisions and involve parents in making those decisions, because they always help us with the redistricting boundaries and what that looks like and which neighborhoods would potentially go where. So we really need direction from the board today about, do we want to move forward with this or not? I understand where you're coming from a financial standpoint, and if you're not prepared to give it to us today, we can bring it back on the 21st. It just continues to push out the other pieces of the puzzle that have to fall into place. Communication to the staff at Canoe Creek Charter, who are anxious. communication to the existing families at Canoe Creek Charter who are starting to become aware and anxious. And then obviously the redistricting decisions, as well as obviously if we are going to prepare a building for use in August, our facilities team needs to get on it in terms of design, even for just the modifications that would have to be done for year 2, and planning and design for what we would want to do in year 2. That's where we are with the time crunch.
And Mr. Weisher, I did reach out to, as you know, as some of you know, this is actually, I live just right down the road from the school, so, and I have a son who is in elementary school who will be if we so choose, who will be redistricted to the school. So it's extremely important to me and my family how we move forward on this. And the one thing that I reached out to Dr. Pace about was, you know, this is going to be a big change for our Kenansville community, for our St. Cloud Manor community, for the Deer Creek community, which is right in it's basically attached to the Canoe Creek Charter property. So my biggest concern was not just the redistricting, of course that is a big concern, but getting all those community meetings and getting all that information out there to not just the folks that are at the school now, but the folks that are going to be rezoned there, because it's going to be a big deal for our South Canoe Creek folks. It's going to be a big change for them. They've been going to the Harmony community schools now for 10, 15 years, and it's a big shift to come to that side.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are some things
So we
that the
do have to
district
get out ahead of this on
could
for
do
that point.
to
But I understand your
automatically
financial
boost
concern.
enrollment
Yeah.
from 384 to 600 or whatever it is, but that doesn't mean that the parents in the schools are going to buy in.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other piece of that would be, who are we going to name as a planning principal to take over this school and help be a huge part of this planning process, this communication to parents and families, this communication and recruitment of staff. We currently have an elementary school position advertised and open because we have a Neptune Elementary School principal who will be retiring at the end of the year. We also learned right before break that Mrs. Derricks at St. Cloud Elementary School has asked to take a district level position with a little less stress than principal because she's expecting her second baby, so we'll be filling that in the next couple of weeks. And I would easily see, if the board decided to move forward, that we would take action for this school as well to kind of get that ball rolling, because chances are good that then recreates a domino effect throughout the district. So there are all of those pieces and parts that have to come together. Ideally today, if the board's not comfortable with that today, that's okay. If the board definitely doesn't want to move forward, I would like to know that today, so we can kind of, you know.
Sure.
Board,
Thank you. Two things. One is I thought the board had agreed that Mr. Booth's son was going to go to either Okeechobee or Indian River County. We don't need another Booth.
You'll drive him, yeah.
I don't want to prolong this or kick it down the road by any stretch, understand. And you'll recall in the workshop we had, I had a couple of concerns. Number one is a conversation with the Foundation and Charter Schools USA and the relationship and partnership that exists there, because they have been partnered with the school district for a long-standing time. Number two is the functional facility aspect, which you guys have reviewed for us, about what is it going to cost us to take this on, and the board going in with their eyes wide open of what the financial implications associated with the capital side are going to be, and you've answered most of that. The only thing that remains for me is, how do we pay for it? Because you're asking us to make a $40 million decision, and you have theory around what the right approach is. I just want to know that this is indeed the right approach. And my question about timeline wasn't like, oh, it's January, let's bring it back in April. It
No,
was
I
like
know.
this meeting or next meeting, do we have to make a decision this evening? Which if we have to, I'll make my decision. Or is there additional financial analysis that should be done so that we can come back in a week or two, put this thing to bed? I'm fine with moving forward. Let me be very clear, because you asked if for some reason the board's not willing to move forward, make that clear. I'm good with moving forward. I just want to make sure I understand exactly how we're going to pay for it and what the best financial decision associated with that is.
I was going to clarify for you also, the decision on how we pay for it does not need to be made today.
Correct.
I just need the thumbs up that you're okay with the cost,
Well,
and
but-
then we'll work forward on what funding source do we want to use,
Which is
do we
the
want
cost
to
that's gonna be
finance it or
incurred
not.
I
Those
get
are
it. I just don't know
related.
that I can bifurcate
Yeah.
those, because in truth, if I make a decision to move forward today, I'm inheriting one of two options, one of which I really don't know exactly what it is.
But any decision to issue debt would absolutely come back to this board
Oh, I know that.
with all the details surrounding that. So yeah, there is a whole spectrum of options in terms of how much cash on hand would we want to use, or how much debt would we want to issue.
But again, we're either doing this or we're pushing forward full steam ahead with the K8 at Hickory Tree. I
Which is
you-
already
so
in your
it's
five-year capital plan.
K5.
You're either-
And that's my point.
Yeah, you're
And
Not
that,
dead
that
on
would
that.
already be impact fee funded.
That's my key.
Right, or the K8 at Winnebago.
Okay.
But also, I'd like to point out, from a timeline standpoint, this 1.5 million in improvements, that requires that we complete design, that we bid work, that we get contractors on board, so that the day following students vacating, that we're in there starting the work. Summers are very short, and to get all this work completed in time for the start of the new school year is something that we have to take into consideration.
And we've had those-
Regarding your first conversation, Mr. Weishauer, your first level of concern, there has been extensive conversation between the Foundation Charter Schools USA and me as your representative for the school district. We've worked very much hand in hand with the communication plan, and there's a communication plan to roll out to staff should we decide to move forward or not. So those pieces and parts are in place with a lot of positive energy and good conversation, and that's been
Positive energy. I like
Let
positive.
me just make one
And Tim, I
comment.
understand your concern about, that it's not necessarily the debt per se, but the issue of spending $20+ million of property tax dollars
Yeah, I mean,
on a school, whereas that's different from what our strategy has been.
yeah, I mean, it's, yeah. And let me just be clear to our partners. I'm good. I appreciate where we are. I appreciate what we're doing. I know what this is. I know that there's been an ongoing partnership and collaboration between the foundation and the school board around this entire piece. I don't want you to misinterpret anything I'm saying today. I'm good, but you understand my fiduciary responsibility is to make sure I'm making the right financial decisions for the district. And each one of us feel the exact same way, I'm sure, respectively. I just want to know how I'm going to pay for what I'm asked to pay for.
Are we, I see we have a redistricting sheet in here. Are we scheduled to talk about that?
Yes, and that's very much tied into that, so I would like to, if it would be a logical progression to move into that now. I asked Ms. Rhonda Blake, our Director of Planning, to join us for that presentation.
Because Rhonda didn't present any map.
Not today.
Not necessary.
We didn't want to get everybody upset already.
Correct.
Okay, so,
Good afternoon.
redistricting.
We have two options before us. We do have a plan, just as Dr. Pace had said, that we could go ahead and relieve Hickory Tree, increase enrollment at Michigan Avenue and Balance with no impact to Canoe Creek Charter, or we also have a plan ready to impact Canoe Creek Charter, Michigan Hickory Tree, and the plans are K5 or K8, and I hear it's going to be K8. So we would be ready to move forward with those plans to have them through the process and effective for the August 1 school year.
Okay. So have you looked at it yet? I mean, so can you tell me where you think the boundaries will be if we do option one? This is all District 5 right here.
you were
so
rel-
I'm just-
you were-
You're not even caring about this. This is
Motion to
all
approve.
District 5 right here.
So option one is just going to be redistricting these 4 schools.
Yes.
If we were to acquire Canoe Creek
Right,
Charter.
and so to Mr. Booth's, do you have an idea? Is there anything you could report to us?
You're relatively close. It would be the immediate community, which is Deer Park,
Deer Creek.
Deer Creek, and then the southern piece that is actually zoned to St. Cloud Elementary. It's always kind of created an island, so it runs down into the Kenansville area. When you take those two areas and combine them, possibility just the Whaley's piece across from the
Whaley's,
school itself,
Whatever they call it, creek, whatever.
that would pretty much fill the school as a K-8 with the
So
long-term
southern part of
growth.
the county, Deer Creek, Whaley's Creek,
It's
but really none of the manor then? Wow.
just maybe a small piece on the south side right there on Deer Run, but I need to see the final numbers. And
Okay,
if-
let me ask you this. If we are then, once we do that, we're talking about a 55-mile-an-hour road, Canoe Creek, which I've driven on a million times. That's where I live. I drive by it every day if I come to town. So that's not every day. But what kind of provisions, Mark, have we looked at about getting some good crosswalk there? Because I can tell you that intersection of Deer Run and Canoe Creek would be extremely dangerous to walk across. So where are we at about crosswalking and those kind of things?
We could work with the municipality to, get them to
The
add
county.
those improvements. The county.
No, wait, it's city up to do it.
City, right.
Okay, it'd be city, that's right.
City of St. Cloud. We can work with them. If it's something that is being created because of the school, they would likely require that we fund those right-of-way improvements.
So what about like it's the Esprit community and those communities down Friars Cove?
Right, anything in that immediate
Anything on that side of
south.
to the lake would stay at the Canoe Creek
We have
Charter.
them in there, yes.
All the way to Kenansville, Yeehaw would go to Canoe Creek Charter.
Staying down on the east side of, you get down there far enough and you're still looking at some point it does still come over and hit Harmony.
Where do you think? Where do you think Harmony would start? Coming back up 441 north of Kenansville.
Yes,
So you all of Kenansville will be redistricted here. You
Sort
believe?
of.
that would be our intent.
Okay.
Used to go down that way for work.
And then maybe just Whaley's Creek and that's it.
Yes. And then we
Significantly
yeah.
reduce some of our bus transportation.
Oh, I know the bus
Right.
transportation will be crazy.
And we work
Good-
with-
good.
we work
It would be
with them.
in a positive way.
We work with them on break
So
points.
what about Canoe Creek Road, south of Deer Run? Like, all of it?
So the reason I'm a little hesitant right now is I had a K-5 plan that goes more along with what you're saying. But once we started adding 6 through 8 and we start bringing in siblings, you significantly cut down the zone. So if I'm recalling correctly, I had none of Deer Run going into the K-8 plan, but I had Deer Run going into the K-5 plan. Because
For
they're,
Canoe Creek Charter? But we don't, but it would just be a K-5 plan for year one.
no, but
Then
when
you
we
would
looked
go
at
ahead.
all of the multiple scenarios, we looked at just leaving it a K-5. So to get to here, to believe it or not, we ran 18 scenarios.
Sure, I can imagine.
So,
We would still zone it as if it were K-8 with
You
your
would go ahead and zone it
Right.
as because you're going to be there in the second year.
and I believe at the end of the day, none of the Deer Run, we just stuck with
I'm talking
Esprit.
about Canoe Creek Road, the south of Deer Run.
Oh, yes, that goes to Canoe Creek Charter.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, so how far into, because then I start thinking about the Mildred Bass Road area and that area, like,
That all went down, that got picked up in Canoe Creek.
okay. So
Canoe
where
Creek
is your
Charter.
cut line, like Packard, Rambler?
So it went all the way south.
No, I mean, where would your eastern boundary be?
We used the
Going
road,
east of Canoe Creek, where's the eastern boundary?
we used Canoe Creek Road as the boundary. We kept everybody on one
So
side.
nothing on the east side of Canoe Creek,
Not right now,
not right now. Only the west side of Canoe Creek.
because of the
Okay.
right-hand pickups.
Gotcha. Okay.
But we don't have that in front of us because obviously we have no idea what we're.
These
okay.
are just,
Like
No, I'm
some-
just asking because
Very
I need to know
specific. I'm like,
who's going to
what
be
are
yelling
you-
at me, who's going to be
Everyone.
happy with me, who's trying to get that out of my mind.
I'll yell at you if you want.
Yeah, sure. No, that's fine. So you're.
He's trying to think of which of his neighbors are going to.
No, I know. I'm like, honestly, specific questions.
I can call you tomorrow.
Yeah, call me tomorrow. Listen,
Absolutely.
and maybe,
'Cause
or,
there are
or at
maps.
least when you get something, maybe put together. Just
We have
even if
preliminary
you don't,
maps. I just
you
needed to know which
deliver to
set.
Tanya or something.
Because they're different
Right.
enough, I didn't
We
want to
don't-
release either set.
No, I totally understand.
But once I get direction tonight, I would know which
So
preliminary
if
set to
none of the
release.
east side of Canoe Creek is going, where would they continue? Stay going to Harmony Middle? Stay going to?
It could be Hickory Tree,
Hickory
it could
Tree
be
or
Harmony
St.
Community,
Cloud,
because
Harmony.
there's a break there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're going to look at kind of redistricting some of that as well. Like you don't have Harmony Community on here, but
No, so long-term, the new community we keep talking about, Buena Lago, we are proposing to put a K-8 school in there. That developer has stepped forward and is agreeing to let us purchase a portion of the property under impact fee credits.
Okay.
That's where you'll get the relief that we need for Harmony Community and additional relief from Hickory Tree and Harmony Middle, because believe it or not, they're full in 5 years.
yeah, no, I can
Yeah.
believe that. Yeah. All right.
Okay. And then the last option was, if we didn't move forward at all, wait another year, but Hickory Tree just would not be able to go another year without some type of
We
relief.
would probably have to do
So I
something
do need-
short term.
To hope, get approval of one plan to relieve Hickory Tree before I leave here tonight to open up redistricting for them.
I'm good. No, I'm good.
Or to look at additional portables at Hickory Tree. There's a possibility.
Of 3 maximum, of which
Three-
one would
three
be
additional.
a restroom, but that wouldn't give us the, we need
Right.
more than 44
Let
seats.
me just ask what this, because I'm still trying to put all this together. So east side Canoe Creek, how far then south east side Canoe Creek?
Where are you at?
So you're south of Deer Run, east
Yes.
on Canoe Creek. We're not sending those to Canoe Creek Charter. Right?
If they're on the west side of Canoe Creek, I have them going to Canoe Creek Charter.
And then
If they're on the east side,
How far though, south?
like whatever is currently assigned to St. Cloud Elementary that's south, we just pick that whole island up and reassign. We would reassign it or redistrict it to,
So,
because,
so Sullivan Road or Mildred Bass is the cut then?
no, it goes a little further than that, because then you head down to Kenansville. So basically everything.
But you're not gonna send everybody on the east side of Canoe Creek all the way to Kenansville into St. Cloud Elementary, and the kids on the west side all the way to Kenansville to Canoe Creek.
The St. Cloud Elementary piece is all being redone to Deer Creek Elementary.
We'll look at it, but
I mean,
you understand what I'm
Canoe
talking about
Creek,
though?
yes.
Like, I understand your east side when you get to the manor, but once you get essentially south of Mildred Bass where the manor
Mm-hmm.
ends, then you're picking up everybody? You understand?
What I can say is if it's in part two of St. Cloud Elementary today, because they
Yeah.
have two independent zones. So
That's
if it's in
right.
the second zone, all of that has been picked up for
Okay,
Deer,
I know
for
that area
Canoe
very
Creek.
well.
Yes.
Because that's mine.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, are
Gotcha.
you-
I'm done. I'm good.
Questions more about this? I'm assuming you'll give us some direction at the board meeting tonight.
I'm good.
We will.
One way or the other, either tell us to table it
We
or
will.
whatever. But we expressed to you kind of our recommendation and where we can go.
We'll make a decision.
And the
Okay.
foundation.
We'll discuss what we need to discuss.
Chair, to answer the question, the district, over here.
I thought you came to see us.
Hang out.
You know, this
Exciting
comes
school
back
board
to you,
workshops.
Based on the lease, this would come back to, if you did nothing, you then in 2 years have to come back and revisit the same subject.
Sure.
All right.
Okay,
Our
that brings us
John
to
friends?
Denjon Middle School project update. Thank you, Brenda. I'll
And they
ask
had a very
Director
exciting
Mark
day at
Lockard
Denjon today, right,
to
Mr.
come
Allen?
forward,
It was a
and
good day.
Project Manager Brian Walker
how nice
with
this
Pirtle
looks.
Construction.
No, good day.
Take it away.
Not eventful. Good.
Mr. Wheeler did send you a picture of a bus accident. Everybody's fine, no injuries. It's all been handled at the sign.
Oh, I wasn't on that email.
Yeah, you all are.
Oh, it's on an email? Oh.
All right, let's celebrate the good news about Denjon Middle
Well,
School
yes,
today.
happy to say that we had students reporting to their brand spanking new school
Look at
today.
this.
We gave them a portion of their brand new school
Yeah.
earlier, but now they've actually moved into building one, so now
Oh,
everything
nice.
is all new and sparkly and shiny. Even though we had some original buildings, as Dr. Pace mentioned earlier, that we've remodeled and we're trying to keep to the same standard, whether it be an old building or a brand-new building. So, if you're familiar with the old school, the amazing thing is you really can't see the new school because it's kind of hidden by the old school. When this goes down, it'll be much more visible.
And very prominent.
And the biggest problem is you've got this tiny little drop-off area in front of the old school. Happy to report that today, when the kids arrived and the teachers arrived, there wasn't even a backup on Denjon at all. It didn't even get to the road. They just all zooped around because right now all the temporary parking is all back here, and there was ample parking for everybody. So it went very, very smooth this morning.
Good news.
So, Brian, would you like to brag about your project a little?
Do you want to go back to the site plan, Brian?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you can go back to the site plan. So
Okay.
like Mark said, this area right here and back here, that's where the teachers are parking now. The temporary parent drop-off right now actually comes up through here and comes around the group of trees right here. So far this morning, I haven't been back there this afternoon, but this morning everything was fine and flowing smoothly. And then we still have the existing bus loop that's up and running, and that'll be until start of school in August. Thanks.
Okay.
You can also touch it and swipe it.
Ooh.
So this was what I think taken back middle of December. So obviously now there's a little bit more furniture in the cafeteria. But here's the cafeteria. This is the serving areas there, and then this is just a picture of the media center shown. Just a couple of pictures here. We have just a regular classroom, and then some of the workstations and some of the lab areas.
This is where you like to
It's
sit.
a makerspace in the bottom right
Yeah,
corner.
I like to sit over here.
So now we'll talk about our last phase of the construction project.
So just to show you a little bit, here is just an outline. Here's Den John Lane here. Here's our temporary parent loop that comes back, does a drop off to the building 200, and where the new front area will be of campus, and then the teacher access will be back here to their parking, which is back behind the new building 100 and over to the side. The area that's highlighted in blue, this was all fenced off now, and this will be demo starting
January 15th.
And then here's just another shot of just showing where the teachers will be parking, and then the access for the parents. And then moving forward, traffic signals are up and running right now. And then moving, where we are currently, all the areas in blue is occupied by students and teachers and staff. The area out front here in the white, this has all been fenced off and be part of the demolition area, and that will where we will currently be working to tear that building down. And then over here, once the portables are removed over here, we'll start working on the track and field area. And then once school is over for the summer, we'll finish up the parking lot that's out front here, and redo and take out the bus loop, the existing bus loop that's in place, and put in the new loops, and then obviously the track and field area will be completed.
So as you can see, the car loop will flip over to the bus loop, and that will align with the new traffic signal with significantly more stacking and parking for the parent loop.
And the receiving area for the kitchen is completely separated from all of that. It's in the back of the house.
It looks great. I mean,
Yeah, good job. Pretty.
besides Canoe Creek Charter, which I drive by the most, and Harmony, which I go to the most because my kid. This is third on the list because my in-laws live right on Millsville Road, and so I'm over there quite a bit. I get to see what's going on over there, and it looks fantastic. I mean, and the pictures that I've seen of the entrance of the new building, it's amazing. It looks great. So thank you guys for your hard work.
Nice.
Yeah,
Thank
my
you, Mr.
comment
Walker.
was just going to be thank you. We talked about this at a very early stage about the staging of a project like this, the importance of meeting this deadline and this completion date here for the opening of the new school year into the second half of this year, if you will. Making sure that all the pieces and parts have been managed. I've heard nothing but good stuff all the way through the project, and so as partners, I just want to say thank you for your work. I know we still have work to do, but if history is any indication of future performance, I think these next 6 months will be as successful as the last year and change that we've been partnering on this. So thank you.
Down to the easy part.
Board,
Minnesota was up to you.
does anyone else want to make any, statement, comments, questions? Everybody satisfied? Very well. I'll call this workshop to adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.